Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar where we will be talking about how to integrate Silva Cells and utilities. My name is Lita Maritz and I'm the Creative Director here at DeepRoot. We're going to go through a few housekeeping items first. We are recording this webinar and we're going to be making it available to everybody via email later on today, so please feel free to send it on to colleagues who weren't able to attend. We know that this is a really hot topic for people, so we want to get this information out to as many people as possible. All attendees are going to be muted throughout the presentation. We're going to try to keep our portion of the presentation to about 30 or 40 minutes so that we have plenty of time for questions at the end. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation using the chat box in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. So you don't need to wait until the end to submit questions. Once we conclude our part of the presentation, I'll be speaking those questions aloud so that everybody can hear them and pass answers. This is the first time we're doing a webinar on this topic, so we would really appreciate any feedback you have for us about what worked and what didn't and what you'd like to see more of. You will be receiving, again, in the same follow-up email after the webinar, a link to a 5-question survey that you can fill out anonymously. So we would love to hear from you. If you don't want to do the survey, you can always just email me directly, lita@deeproot.com. So our presentation today is going to be led by Pat Greeley, who is our technical manager. Pat primarily works with contractors and anyone else with questions about Silva Cell installation and construction, and he visits 90% of our first-time installations. Obviously, utilities is a very important topic. It's going to be hard for us to cover every possible scenario in a single webinar, but we're going to do our best. And as you'll see, today's presentation is made up entirely of real-world examples of projects Pat has personally seen go in the ground. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Pat Greeley, and as Lita said, I am the technical manager for DeepRoot. And as part of that, I spend a lot of time on the different job sites. I try and make it to the majority of our first-time installations, and I also visit a lot of sites when their issues come up to try and help everyone work through those as quickly as possible. Just a little bit about me. I have a degree in landscape architecture, but I've spent most of my career in the construction industry. Over the past 18 years, I have been in various levels of construction, from labor foreman, field engineer, superintendent, and project manager. And the majority of the projects that I've been involved with before coming to DeepRoot were civil infrastructure, a lot of dense urban reconstruction type projects. So I'm not saying by any means that I've seen everything when it comes to utilities, but I have a fair amount of experience working around them. So, all right, let's get started with the presentation. Just a quick recap of what the Silva Cells are. Silva Cells are a stackable modular shoring system used for supporting pavements. There's two main components, the deck and the Silva Cell frame. What I want to point out about the frame is that the frame is a very open design, and because of that open design, it lends itself well to running utilities through them. Also, because the deck section only goes on the top layer of Silva Cells, the top is open, and the legs can be rotated underneath existing utilities, so that even ones that are buried on both ends can be added to the system. Okay, Silva Cells are installed in stacks of 1, 2, or 3 layers deep. They stack vertically and interlock vertically, but they do not stack horizontally. There's actually somewhere from a 1 to 3 inch gap between the Silva Cells. And I just want to pause it for a minute and say, I recognize that not everyone uses the imperial measurement system, And we do have all this information in metric as well. It's just that I'm more comfortable using the imperial, so please pardon that we're only going in one system here. But again, everything is available in metric. Okay, key topics for today. We're going to talk about running utilities through the Silva Cell frames. So we're going to talk about options when utilities cannot be run through the Silva Cell frames. Talk a little bit about planning for the future, and then we're going to spend a fair amount of time on repairs and maintenance. Running utilities through the Silva Cell frames. Again, we talked about the openness of the frames. They lend themselves well to the utilities being integrated right into the frames. You can see in this picture there's a number of different utilities that are being added into the Silva Cell system and being worked around. This project is in California, in Castro Valley Boulevard. You can see there's electrical conduits on the left side here. There's an irrigation sleeve that's going across the road, bringing the mainline irrigation across, and then the stub-ups are for laterals running each way. And you can also see more electrical in galvanized steel conduit as well. This is a project from in the Netherlands. Again, you can see a combination of how the Silva Cells can be put underneath existing utilities and then the next stack added over the top so that they can be incorporated right in. This project is near Niagara Falls in Ontario. Again, the street lighting conduits being run through the Silva Cells. Gas project or a gas service on a project in Winnipeg. Here's a project on Bainbridge Island in Washington, where there's actually a 2-inch water main that fed an area that was run through the Silva Cells, as well as service running off. Here's a project from Collingwood, Ontario, where side-by-side double water service, so 2 copper water services running next to each other in the same trench. And actually here, because the Silva Cells are able to be spread apart anywhere from 1 to 3 inches, we actually ran the services right between 2 Silva Cells. Here's another project with a PVC storm drain being run through the Silva Cells. Options for when utilities can't be run through the Silva Cells. Probably one of our most common details and kind of our go-to detail when there's a problem with the utility not being able to be run through the Silva Cells themselves is to make what we call an aggregate gap. And so we run the utilities, run the Silva Cell frames up as close to the utility as possible, then isolate the open area with GeoGrid and fill that void with a clear stone product, something around a 1-inch clear rock. The idea is to build a stone column to support your pavement, and the voids between the rock will allow the roots of the trees to migrate back and forth between the 2 soil volumes that you've separated. If you think about stacking marbles, the GeoGrid is to help confine the rock so to make sure it's stackable and it doesn't spread out. Again, if you try and stack marbles out in the open, they don't stack up well, but if you stack them inside of a box or something, or a vase or anything like that, as long as it's confined, they'll stack up and they won't move. So again, that's the concept behind the GeoGrid and the aggregate. Here's an example. Here's a subsurface drainage cleanout on a project in Toronto. You can see the Silva Cell frames run up on the 3 sides, concrete wall on the other side, run GeoGrid around the perimeter. Then this void area in here will be filled with clear stone to make a clear stone column. Similarly, here's a sanitary cleanout. Again, you have GeoGrid on all 4 sides, and you can see the stone starting to come up. This is a project in Owensboro, Kentucky, where what's exposed and what's shown is mainline irrigation being run through Silva Cells. But what you don't see underneath the white rock is that there's actually 3 3-phase power lines that are running through there. And because those wouldn't fit through the utilities, we decided to make aggregate gap in that area And as long as we were making the aggregate gap, once we got up over the top of the power, then we used that same opportunity to run the irrigation through there. Here's a light basin on one of the waterfront Toronto projects. Again, the geogrid hasn't been installed all the way around. You can see it on the back side and on the front side, but you don't necessarily see it. You don't necessarily see it around here. It should be going around the back side, around this side, and around here to completely enclose it. Okay. The next technique follows up on the aggregate gap detail. What we call it is bridging utilities with Silva Cells, and this works, especially well for concrete ducts. If you have electrical duct or telephone duct, it can also work with your larger diameter, like a PVC storm drain or sanitary, things of that nature, where we build the bottom layer of Silva Cells just like we normally would, then run geogrid up the first frame on both sides. So you would have geogrid here, and then that middle area is filled with clear stone until you get a foundation. If it's a fairly large area, it can actually just be your compactable fill over the top until you get a sufficient amount of soil or rock that on top to protect the utility, and then a Silva Cell can be run across the top. So you have this conduit or area for the roots to move from one soil volume to the other, only it's just only one cell deep in that area versus down in the bottom around the utility. So here's an example of a project like that. This is a project in the Netherlands. You can see there's a large concrete storm line that is running down the middle of where the Silva Cells are going to go. See Silva Cells installed on either side of the storm line. The geogrid run up to the bottom of the top layer so that it's covering the first layer. Then fill material is put in there and compacted, and the second layer of cells is put over the top. Similarly, this is a project in Thunder Bay, Ontario, where there's Silva Cells around a tree pit or tree opening here. They're supposed to extend this way towards the curb, but because of some major electrical conduits, they couldn't be put in deep enough. So you see in that case, filled over the top of the electrical conduits and added the Silva Cells around the tree opening so that they're even with the top layer of the adjacent Silva Cells. So your tree will be in here, and you have Silva Cells on both sides to support the concrete around the tree opening, and also to help that tree roots work their way into the Silva Cells over here and then down. Okay. Another option is bridging over the utilities with small reinforced concrete slabs. In the event that you don't want to go with the aggregate detail or some of the other methods aren't going to work, you can just leave out Silva Cell. And this is one of DeepRoot's standard details. The engineering has already been done on the concrete slab. I believe it's an 8-inch slab with a little bit of reinforcing in it, and that is then poured over the gap where the missing Silva Cells are. And that detail is designed and engineered to span up to a 24-inch gap. Now, we started to move into some projects where we are spanning larger gaps. These involve designing more custom designed, either precast or cast in place concrete slab. We've done them at various different dimensions, but the concept is that you have a reinforced concrete slab that is supported on one side by a pier of Silva Cells and then on the other side by a pier of Silva Cells. This is actually a detail from a Bomber Command project in London. It was really important for them to get some soil volume for some very prestigious trees, but there was a number of utility conflicts, so luckily there was room to get a stack of Silva Cells just behind the back of curb. Then they exposed the utilities and filled as much of the area as they could with good planting soil and added a concrete slab over the top. Looking down on it, it looks something like this. You can see here's your one bundle of utilities. Here's your other bundle of utilities. This is a beam holding up some other things just temporarily. Then when it's done, this is looking down on it once it's done. This is the outline of the concrete slab. It's supported on this side by Silva Cells and on this side by Silva Cells. And then this area all back in here is Silva Cells as well. And then that ties into adjacent green area. Another variation of that, this is a City of Toronto detail. Only in this case, the Silva Cells are only supporting the concrete slab on one side. You'll see here they use a special curb detail that's molded into the curb. There's a recessed area for the slab to sit in. Then on the other side, there's a concrete header that is supported on the Silva Cells. You see this trench area is all filled in with soil, and red shows what the precast slabs will look like roughly as they're put in place. You can see this down here, right here, this is a big bell duct that they're working around, as well as some other utilities. You can see the Silva Cell peeking out here that's supporting this concrete piece. So looking down in plan view somewhat, this gives you an idea. Here's your concrete curb piece. Here's your back piece. These are how the panels will be laid in, and then eventually the same paving pattern will be brought over the top of these precast panels to make everything come together. Okay. Now, it's not always going to be an option to run the Silva Cells through the utilities. We recognize that. On a number of projects, what we see is when there's new utilities or that there's a chance to relocate the utilities, that it works out well when they're run just outside the edge of the Silva Cells. That way they can share the same excavation and same backfill operation, and you don't have to worry about coming back in and digging them in a second operation. This is a project in Guelph, Ontario. You can see the Silva Cells are being installed. They're backfilled up to the first layer. Then the new telecommunications and electric ducts are being put in and backfilled as the rest of the system is being backfilled. Similarly, this is a Waterfront Toronto project where there's a large electrical duct that was constructed at the same time the Silva Cells were going in, just to the outside of the Silva Cell system. Planning ahead. Especially when it comes to new installations, if there's a chance to incorporate utility corridors, that's always a good idea. This is, again, one of the Waterfront Toronto projects. You can see they've left an exception in the Silva Cells that they would run geogrid on this side of the Silva Cells, geogrid on this side of the Silva Cells, and then fill this area with compacted fill up to the bottom of the aggregate section. Then mark this area in the as-built drawing so they know where it is. And in the future, when they need to cross this area of Silva Cells, they can come back and use this area. Talked about pictures of the utility for the new electrical duct being formed. It's always a good idea when there is new duct or when there are Silva Cells being incorporated into a project to think about future capacity. If you can add in a couple spare conduits in the duct run, or even if you can just run in like a PVC pipe that can be used for a future sleeve if needed, whether it's for irrigation or whether it's for electric or street lighting, anything that needs to cross the Silva Cells. We also recommend marking utilities in some way. One nice thing about the Silva Cells, and when you have the utilities in the Silva Cells, is that once they're on a run of decks, you know which frames they're inside of, so it's relatively easy to, once you've found the utility, to line up where it's running and you know where it is. We recommend using some type of a utility marker right on top of the decks, just below the geotextile fabric and aggregate, to help identify where those utilities are. For those of you who are wondering, because the Silva Cell decks do have some galvanized reinforcing rods in the top, some people are concerned as to whether or not that electromagnetic locators will work, and they do. They are still able to find different services. You know, by using like a Metrotech or something similar, where you can put a electrical pulse down it, it's still able to be read through the Silva Cells. And also, as far as finding the perimeter of Silva Cells, if they aren't marked, that ground penetrating radar systems have proven to be effective for locating the perimeter of the Silva Cell areas. One thing that we've heard of success stories and that we think is a really good idea is registering the Silva Cells with the underground utility notification service. You know, typically there's like a local one-call service or a local utility notification service where contractors or anyone else doing work in an area can call in, give the description of the area, and then be given a list of the utilities in that area. There have been some cases where various Silva Cell owners have been able to get the Silva Cells registered with the utility notification service, and so when contractors will call in, they're informed that there are Silva Cells in the area. I just wanted to throw in a quick note or two about directional boring. A common question we get a lot is because the soil is not compacted very densely in the Silva Cell system, a lot of the people who are working the directional boring field or are involved with directional projects are concerned that the pneumagogue or the boring head will not hold grade, will settle and take off on them. But we've done it during a test project. This was done in Toronto. An Enbridge crew came out and did a test, and they had no problem shooting through a Silva Cell installation. You can see here, they're shooting underneath this section of Silva Cell pavement. You see the pneumagogue for the boring head going in. You see it coming out on the other side. It came out right on line and on grade. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about repairs and maintenance. You know, this is always a popular topic. People are always concerned, yeah, we've got the Silva Cells in the ground, we've got them worked around the utilities, but you know, now there's a problem with the utility. And now we have to go in there and do some type of repair or maintenance. You know, now what are we into? First of all, we've laid out some recommended steps for when there is a repair needed or any maintenance when you'll be working near or in the Silva Cell system. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's all pretty much common sense, but you want to call your local one-call agency. You want to remove the pavement in the area and excavate down to the geotextile fabric that's on top of the deck. Expose the geotextile fabric and cut that away. At that point, you'll be able to see the deck. If it's a shallow utility, you can remove the deck and then use a hydrovac or hand dig out the soil. Remember, that soil is not compacted very heavily, so it digs well. Then you can expose that utility. You know, do your work and then do repair on the Silva or replace the Silva Cells. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, the different options for repairing or replacing or restoring the Silva Cells. You know, backing up to on the excavation process, you know, I talked about when it's a shallow excavation, you just take the decks off. If it's deeper, you have your choice. You can either, you know, dig out the soil or hydrovac out the soil and remove the frames and salvage them, or you can also just, you know, take out the frames, either excavate them out or just break them out as you go through and then replace them. So it kind of depends on, one, how much time you have, two, how deep you're going or how many frames are involved, and three, the restoration effort. Okay, I'm going to go through two examples of what I think are good representative examples of repairs. They're broken down into two types of categories. One was a planned water service repair in Winnipeg. There's a water main running out in the street and they needed to go out and tie into that water main and run in a new water service for the fire suppression system on a building. And then the other one we'll talk about is one that simulated an emergency repair. Okay, this is the planned water service repair. See the water mains out in the street, out here. You can see where the Silva Cells are, and the new line to the fire suppression system had to run right through the Silva Cells. There's the area of excavation delineated by the red lines. See, they took off the pavement. You can see they excavated down, and then they scraped off the rest of the aggregate remaining so that they could expose the geotextile fabric, and then they cut that out of their way, exposing the top of the decks. At that point, they excavated through, got their hole opened up. You can see the water main right down here that they're going to connect to. See the remainder of the Silva Cells up here. Then afterwards, they filled the excavation back up to the bottom. This happened to be a 3-layer Silva Cell system. You can see there's 1, 2, 3 layers of Silva Cells right here. They filled and compacted and worked their way up again, like I said, to the bottom of where the Silva Cells were. And they reinstalled the Silva Cell frames, being careful to put the utilities and everything back in place the way they were. Put the decks on, and finished rebuilding the final pavement. Okay. The next project I want to talk about is a simulated emergency repair project. This was done in conjunction with the City of Toronto. So this was done at a test site. The first thing we did was excavate down below where the Silva Cells were going to go to the depth of where water main would normally be. Then the contractor installed a 6-inch PVC pipe going across the excavation, and then proceeded to cut a slot in the top to function as a crack or a break in the water main. Once the water main was run out past the Silva Cell area, there was a riser put on it and some adapters so that it would be able to be hooked up to a hydrant. After that, the Silva Cells were constructed per normal construction techniques. You can see this blue riser pipe right over here. That's where eventually the water is going to be fed into the water main, or the pipe that's running underneath the Silva Cells, acting as the water main. Then we were lucky enough last year to find one real day of winter in Toronto, and we came back on that day. You can see here's the service coming out of the ground here. They ran hose over from an adjacent fire hydrant and started pumping water to our broken water pipe underneath the Silva Cells. You can see after time the water started bubbling to the surface. And one comment that was interesting by the City of Toronto hydro workers is that they said they thought there were some advantages to the Silva Cells in that because the soil in the Silva Cells is loose, they thought that when it comes to water main breaks, that the water should come to the surface fairly near the origin of where the leak is. In other words, they aren't going to be hunting all over trying to find where the leak is, because a lot of times when the ground is frozen, solid, or when it's very densely compacted, you end up chasing that water leak, sometimes over a fairly great distance before you find the actual origin of it. Okay, once we got enough water bubbling through to make a big mess, we decided it was time to start the repair. First thing was to saw the concrete on top into panels that could be easily removed by an excavator. Next, again, expose the aggregate on top down to the geotextile fabric, and then cut the geotextile fabric out of the way. Now here, as we discussed previously, you have the option. You can unscrew these decks and salvage them, and you can hydrovac or work your way around these frames and remove them and salvage them. But that's not the option we went with here. This was to simulate a broken water main or a ruptured gas service or something that needs immediate attention where the time is of the essence. So in this demonstration, we just dug right through the Silva cells. And the excavator just dug through them and loaded it all just as they were digging the rest of the excavation out. Eventually they exposed the pipe and got to a point where the repair could be made. Another thing to point out is that, and this isn't going to be in all cases, but it's important to point out that the Silva, because of the soil in the Silva cells is not densely compacted and it's typically not a very dense or heavy soil, you don't get all the soil pressure around the outside perimeter of your excavation, and it's soil pressure on the outside that helps push in the walls of the excavation. So in other words, excavations tend to stand open a little bit better when you're digging through the Silva cells because of the less ground pressure around the perimeter of the excavation, and may lend itself to helping reduce the size of the actual excavation. But it's important to note that you still need to use the proper shoring, and it in no way should be seen as a means for not using the proper shoring. Okay. Now it's to the restoration point. We're assuming the repair has been made now. Time to get on with the restoration. As far as the restoration, there's two ways to approach it. One is to restore the area temporarily and come back and do the final restoration later. The other is to make do your permanent restoration at the time of the repair. And just want to talk a little bit about restoring temporarily at the time of repair. One thing that we hear a lot from the cities is that these Silva cells may be in an urban area. We have sidewalk, we have business owners. We're out there in the middle of the night. We need to get this area back opened up quickly. And so one suggestion for when time is of the essence is to simply just fill the area back in with either a clear stone or an unshrinkable fill. Unshrinkable fill is really popular in the cold weather climates, and especially in Canada. They call it U-fill or unshrinkable fill. It's like a flowable concrete. It's a sand. It's a sand light cement mix, so it sets up similar to concrete, but it's still able to be excavated through. So then you get a foundation. You make a temporary repair, and then at a more appropriate time, after you've been able to notify the different people who are going to be affected by the shutdown, you're able to come back, close the walkway or whatever's impacted, and make your permanent repair. Okay, so this is the site, the demonstration site. They had filled it with this flowable concrete, and now they're coming back and they're excavating down through the flowable concrete to the point where they would want to start their Silva cell reconstruction. At that point, you would use one of the permanent Silva cell restoration options. Okay, as far as the restoration options, I'm just going to lay out three main ones, but I mean, there's literally, a dozen different ways that you can do the restoration creatively. But these are just kind of the three main options that we have seen and think will work well. One is compact your trench area, either filling this, if it's wet, you want to use like a clear stone or a U-fill type product so you get out of the water so you can get a solid base. Basically recompact your subgrade up to the bottom of the Silva cells. Make sure you get a good solid base for your Silva cell frames to sit in, and then restore the Silva cells by either the ones you salvaged or with new Silva cell frames. Just as you install those and fill them with soil, just as you would a new installation. Another version of that same thing is get your soil compacted below the Silva cell area. Make sure you have your base reestablished. Only here though, taking off on our utility bridging gap or our utility bridging detail that we showed earlier on. You would put geogrid on either side to contain the compactable soil here, or it can be compactable soil, it can be clear stone, be whatever your foundation material is. Run that up all the way to the bottom of the top layer of Silva Cells. Just put one layer of Silva Cells back in, just so you have that bridge, so that those roots have the chance to share the soil volumes, the adjacent soil volumes, or the soil volumes that have been separated. Option 3 would be similar to the aggregate gap detail. Again, establish your foundation down to the bottom of the Silva Cells. You run GeoGrid in on the sides to contain whatever material you're using to fill in here. At that point, you can fill this with, clear stone would be a good option. You can fill it with compactable soil, and but with that, you're going to have to compact it to make sure you can support the pavement above. You have and then you could use U-fill or unshrinkable fill. It's just in those cases, when you're using unshrinkable fill, remember the roots are not going to move through the unshrinkable fill itself. So that's good if it's, say, in the middle of the Silva Cell area, or there's some way that you can still allow for root access back and forth. But I mean, if it's a small area, you're just affecting a couple of cells, and it's in a large run of Silva Cells, it's not the end of the world. Another option, we don't have it drawn up here, but another option is to use, if this isn't very wide, you can use that minor gap detail, and you could just pour a reinforced concrete slab in this area to span across that if you want to make that all planting soil and didn't want to use one of the gap details. And last but not least, after the Silva Cell area is restored, rebuild the final pavement. Now, a common question we get a lot is, the repair, that's fine, it's all well and good, but, who's going to pay for that? And, that question is difficult for us to answer. I mean, that's kind of a public policy, and it really depends on the installation and the owners of the Silva Cells, the ultimate owner. But again, I think we've presented some different options versus both on time and on cost, because basically digging through and making the repair, whether the Silva Cell is there or not, is really not a lot different. Where you do incur some additional costs is when you make the repair. But under the different scenarios, there's definitely different costs associated with the different scenarios. Okay, in conclusion, I just want to point out that there's many options for working in and around both new and existing utilities. Where possible, if you can plan for the future, that's great. We talked about utility corridors, we talked about adding extra conduits, things like that. When it comes to repairs, both planned and emergency repairs are not that much different with the Silva Cells. Again, we talked about it's a little bit different when you get into the restoration process, but I think, like I said, we've presented some different ways to handle that. And last but not least, I just want to end by saying, you also have to keep the issue of Silva Cells and utilities in perspective. I know everyone thinks of, oh my God, it's a jungle of utilities, but if you think about it, and I'm not trying to diminish the importance and the conflicts that will arise, but also you have to remember there's thousands upon thousands of miles of utilities in every city, and Silva Cells are used commonly, but in comparison to how much utilities in the ground, your number of incidents of contact between Silva Cells and utilities are a fraction of that, and then of that fraction, that's where a leak or maintenance is going to occur. So again, it's a very important topic. It's definitely something that the utility people have to deal with, that everyone has to deal with. And again, I'm not trying to diminish it. I'm just trying to say or point out that it's not in every case where you're going to have a problem. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their attendance, and I think we'll turn it over to questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That was great, and we've had a lot of questions come in, so we'll get right in. The first one, have Silva Cells been installed in any subarctic locations? We're in USDA Zone 1 and are concerned about freeze-up or ice damming the system. Can you speak to that?
Yes. The furthest north that we have installed them would, I'm guessing, would be Edmonton. We've done a couple different projects in Edmonton, and we haven't had any difficulties to report. We do them consistently across Canada. We've done quite a few of them in the Minneapolis area, which is close. Thunder Bay, Regina, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Toronto. We even had one project in Juneau, Alaska.
So not something people should be concerned about in some?
No. There's definitely some things you want to pay attention to in the colder climates. Working if it's going to be installed in the winter, or even when temperatures are getting colder, you want to make sure that you don't get frost underneath the Silva cells as they're being constructed. I mean, it's the same as any civil construction. I keep frost out from underneath the foundation and while it's being built, things like that. But as far as, and one thing about the Silva cells too is, again, the dirt inside of them, I shouldn't say the dirt, excuse me, the soil inside of them is not heavily compacted, and it's usually a free draining soil, and usually there's some type of drainage. So you don't tend, and also as it settles and it breaks, the organic matter starts to break down a little bit, we're going to get a void underneath the decks. We plan on having a 1 to 2 inch void eventually as the system moves along for air exchange. But again, so that the soil not being compacted along with that void underneath the decks gives you some room for the frost heave, expansion and contraction of the soil during those different warm-cold cycles.
Great, thank you. And I also just want to chime in that we also have several projects in Anchorage as well, while we're talking about northern projects. We have a bunch of questions about the aggregate fill, so I'm going to just kind of lump those together for you, Pat, if that's okay.
Okay. Yep.
We have one person who wants to know whether that can be structural soil, and we have another question about whether there are any fines in that aggregate fill.
We're going to need to separate those.
Okay.
Just because there's three different kinds of aggregates that I think we can break it down to. One is the aggregate that goes underneath the Silva cells. There's typical detail calls for 4 inches or of subbase. That's an aggregate subbase that the Silva cells set on. The next aggregate is whatever you're backfilling around the perimeter of the Silva cells with, and that can either be an aggregate or it can also be material that comes out of the excavation that gets reused around the perimeter as long as it's compactable. So it could be that, or if we're talking about the clean stone that using in the gap details, that's a different aggregate. So can we kind of try and decide which one, or I can talk about all three briefly?
I think you should talk about the aggregate that's used to bridge the gaps.
Okay. That if you want to be a clear stone, to answer the question, you could use structural soil. But you have to remember, structural soil is roughly 80% the same stone we're going to be using and 20% soil. And the thing about it is that structural soil isn't always available. It's a mixed product, and it has a shelf life, and it also is only made by certain people. So that's why we say if it's going to be a large area, obviously it's better for the trees if you can do something like that. But it's only fractionally better than just the clear stone. And especially in smaller areas, those tree roots are going to move right through that rock to find the soil on the other side without having to hassle with finding structural soil that's available, bringing it to the job, having it mixed up in small portions, just the things that go with it. So, we're comfortable with just a clear stone, but certainly anything that, that you can do that would add a benefit for the tree is a good thing too. Mm-hmm. As far as, go ahead. Do you have a question, Lena?
Well, no, you finish up and then I'll chime in again. Okay.
We get a lot of questions about the aggregate subbase that the Silva cells sit on, that 4 inches or 100 millimeters. Typically what we like to see there is a road-based type product, a 1 inch or 3/4 minus with some fines, because it's nice to have something to grade out smooth on top. So you get the basis to sit level and you get a full contact area of the base with that surface. In some of the projects, especially in our stormwater applications where infiltration is critical, we do see some projects that are installed on like more of a 57 stone. If you have your choice, the 3/4 inch 57 is much more preferable than the inch or inch and a half 57 stone, just because it's a little bit easier to grade out on top. Another detail that some of the contractors use when they're using the larger rock is they will bring a load of mason sand, washed concrete sand, or buckshot, real small P-rock, and spread just a very thin, like a setting bed layer over the top to help level out underneath the Silva cells. And then thirdly, I just want to touch on the backfill around the perimeter. Again, most times, as long as it's good compactable soil, you can use the soil that comes out of the excavation for that. However, in some cases, if that soil isn't good, or just for ease of compaction, contractors will sometimes bring in like a granular material or some type of a select grading soil.
Great, thank you. Regarding the geogrid that wraps around the outside perimeter of the system, will that constrict tree roots eventually?
At some point there might be some, but the biggest part of the tree roots will come through, and then as the tree roots come out of the system, they will push that geogrid open, and at a time when the roots are big enough, they should actually be able to separate that geogrid enough to get through. Also, the root will put a larger root down, or start as a larger root and continue to telescope out. So, is it ideal? It's not the ideal thing, but of your different choices of being able to spread your system out, it is a good solution. I mean, it's been used on a number of, almost all of our installations, and so far we haven't had a problem.
And I would just add that because the geogrid does go around the perimeter of the system, as Pat was saying, because roots taper quite rapidly, by the time they're at that furthest extent of the system, they're usually quite small. So we're not too concerned about it for that reason as well. All right, the next question.
Can I just follow up? Can I just follow up one thing on the geogrid? And two, we have a list of recommended or approved geogrids, and we've spent a fair amount of time trying to optimize the aperture or the size opening in the geogrid. Excuse me. to optimize the largest opening we can get versus the strength. So there's been a fair amount of engineering that's gone into that. And the aperture on our recommended geogrid is up to, I believe, 1.25 inches. So you have like 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches opening. It's a fairly large size opening, and then that also stretches as larger than that.
Thanks for adding that. That's great. That's great information. Now we do have a lot of questions, and we are getting close to noon, so we're going to try to get to all of them, and we're going to go past noon to try to do that. But we're going to also be answering them as quickly as possible, so we can get to as many. Sorry, Pat?
I said no one asked me if that was okay. I'm just kidding.
Got a captive audience. All right, so the next question is about whether there are any problems with differential settlement when using the gap bridging technique.
Again, we have not seen any problems. We've used, especially the aggregate gap detail, extensively. Again, as in anything in construction in the ground, compaction is key. Compaction everywhere around. You want to make sure that the geogrid is put in properly. You want to make sure the rock, the stone that gets in there is, when you get to the top, is at least get some kind of tamping down on it to make sure that the rock finds all of its, kind of works itself in with each other and gets kind of some aggregate interlock going. And then you want to make sure that you run your geotextile fabric over the top, and you make sure you compact your subbase under the pavement, your aggregate. That's part of your pavement section. So again, just to make sure that everyone's clear, when you do like the aggregate gap detail or some of these other gap details, especially the aggregate gap detail. The aggregate comes up to the top of the decks. At that point, geotextile fabric is run over the top of all the decks and covers over that aggregate gap detail. So then you have a uniform section of aggregate that's underneath your pavement. So in other words, you're going to have your 3/4 or 1.5 inch aggregate that's in your aggregate gap detail up to the top of your Silva Cell decks. Then it'll have fabric over the top. On top of that, you'll have 4, 6, 8, 12 inches of a typical aggregate, like a road base or material that goes underneath your pavement and then your pavement. So as long as that's all constructed well, there shouldn't be any problems.
Great. Do you have any examples of installations of stormwater detention or trees planted on top of the cells? And I think that question also should kind of probably be broken into two. Unless, Pat, you disagree, please chime in. The question of whether we have examples of installations that are related to stormwater management is yes, we do. We have a number of those, and we have a select number of case studies of those projects that are all available to be downloaded off the DeepRoot website. If you go to deeproot.com and go to the products section, select Silva Cell, and then there's a tab just for case studies, and you can filter those by application type, whether it's for trees only or for trees and stormwater. And we do have a number of them. As to whether trees, we have examples of trees planted on top of the cells. I might be misinterpreting that question, so the asker should write in again if I am, but the trees do not get planted on top of the cells. The cells surround the tree. So if the tree is like the donut hole, the cells are the donut. Pat, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, we have done, there's at least one project that comes to mind where we've installed just Silva Cells and no trees, where the Silva Cells are just used strictly as a stormwater treatment device, and there are trees in the vicinity, but there are not necessarily trees linked to the Silva Cells. We've also done an installation that comes to mind recently where the trees will be above and adjacent to the Silva Cells, so they'll be, but they are not actually incorporated into the Silva Cells. I guess a third type of project that we've done, I'm thinking of the Aurora Shoreline project, is where it's kind of shared soil volume and water storage. So just to try and give you a description of what that project looks like, if you think of the roadway and then you think of the curb, and then behind the curb there is a rain garden or an area that collects water. So the boulevard is a rain garden or a green area, and the trees are planted in there. Then working away from the curb, the next thing is the sidewalk, and then the Silva Cells are underneath the sidewalk, and then your pavement. And then in a lot of places, because it's an urban area, it's hard surface all the way to the property line from there and beyond. So so instead of just having the green area or the rain garden area where the trees are planted as your only green area, that's what it looks like from the surface, but it's actually Silva Cells for stormwater retention and soil volume underneath the adjacent sidewalk and hard surface.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, we just finished a project recently in Maryland where the trees are planted right behind the back of curb. It's all going to look green for the most part, but below the surface, and so just adjacent behind the trees, there's a large bank of Silva Cells, and that's used for stormwater storage and treatment. And then the trees will have access to that.
Thanks for adding those. The next couple questions both have to do with what goes into the system. So I'm going to put those together too, Pat, and maybe ask you to answer that question in two parts. The first part is, do the cells rely on soil for structural integrity, or can they be installed without any fill material? And the second part is, can cells be filled with stone to be used as an in-ground water detention device?
Great question. By the way, all these questions are great, and I'm glad we're getting all of them. The question, as far as filling with stone, yeah, and we have some pictures of projects where they've done stone, and they've done sand, and then we have some where they've actually layered them. So you maybe have stone in the bottom with a layer of filter sand over the top of that, and then the upper half of the Silva cells is then filled with planting soil. So you have almost like you would a rain garden design, a 3-layer where you have a drainable soil mix for the trees, and then below that you have your filter mediums. So yeah, there's a number of different things. As far as can they be empty, we haven't had a project like that. As far as from a structural capacity, the soil inside is not part of the calculations. So in other words, the Silva cell, when you do the testing and the load testing and all that, they're done empty. And our test information does not include soil inside. That said, when you start not putting anything in there and you start putting soil around the outside, you get into some other lateral loading issues because there isn't that backing or mass when you're compacting. And so if someone had a project, they were interested in doing that, we could sure look at the engineering, and depending on, again, what is going on in the environment where they're being installed, if it's a high traffic area, if it's a low traffic, if it's a green area, if it's under pavement, all those things. I would say it would be no problem in a green area. Other applications, we definitely want to talk about it more in depth before we comment. But
yeah, and they are really designed to be used with soil.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I feel like that should be the takeaway message. Can you talk a little bit more about how compacted the soil inside the system is?
Yeah, when we're talking to contractors as far as installation, we talk about foot pressure, roughly 80% density. So Silva cell is 16 inches tall. Each frame is 16 inches tall, and we have the contractors fill each frame in 2 lifts. So they'll put about an 8-inch lift in the one frame, in the first frame, walk through that, spread that out, just make sure they get their feet on it. They don't have to stomp or do anything special. Then put another lift in and walk over that, and then they would start on the next lift. So so you have people, a good-sized person, an adult walking over soil that's fairly compactable soil. That's roughly in an 8-inch uncompacted lift. So sometimes it takes 2, sometimes it takes 3 lifts to get up through one frame.
Okay. And what kind of surface loads can the system support?
The system is designed to support the H20 axle loading or wheel loading standard, and depending on different variations, but that is what our standard details are designed to, and that's what we're designed to support.
AASHTO H20, okay.
AASHTO H20, yes.
Great. During the repairs, you reviewed a couple of repair scenarios toward the end of the presentation. How do you handle roots that are in the Silva cell if they're in the area of excavation?
I mean, it all depends. We would sure like to see, we would like to think that they would be handled with care, and that, you would have someone there to advise as to how to best handle them. Say a forestry person, if it's in a municipality where that's available. The truth of the matter is, I think, though, it's really going to depend on who you have as the contractor and the time that's involved, and what they perceive to be the time that it's going to take. So, I mean, again, ideally, we'd like to have someone involved that would say, hey, you can take that route off here, you can take that route off here, work your way through there. But at the end of the day, I think each situation is going to be a little bit different.
Okay. When doing a project located in a public right-of-way, like between a road and a sidewalk, should a root barrier be installed along the sidewalk side of the Silva cells?
You have the drive lane, then you have your curb, then you have a green area, and then you have the sidewalk. Is that the scenario?
Well, it's not specified in the question, but I think, maybe if you just address it as where is the place for root barrier, in this system, that would be helpful.
Root barrier, is typically around the tree opening, in the tree opening, because with the Silva Cell, you have and we have some details that would be more helpful than me trying to explain this, that maybe we could send out to this person. But as far as when you build on a typical Silva Cell installation where the Silva Cells surround, or at least on 2 or 3 sides of the tree opening, okay, you build your Silva Cells up to the deck. But from the deck on up, you're going to have an aggregate section, and then you're going to have your pavement section. So that could be anywhere from a minimum of 8 inches, 4 inches pavement, 4 inches of concrete, all the way up to 16 inches, say, 12 inches of aggregate, plus your paver section. So that zone is what we're trying to protect with the root barrier, that we don't want any tree roots taking off, getting out, and growing on top of the deck in that aggregate section below your pavement. So what we recommend is putting root barrier around the inside of the tree opening, just down from the top of the finished pavement, to make sure you protect, or you cover the inside, from the inside of the tree opening, you cover that zone of aggregate underneath, so that when the tree roots grow out, they grow down deep into the Silva Cells, and then they find the soil they want, and they stay down there. Mm-hmm. So as far as in the question at the tree, I would recommend root barrier, at the tree opening, at the sidewalk side. If I'm visualizing it correctly, if the tree is between the curb and the sidewalk, I would recommend it at the tree. I don't know necessarily the whole length of the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does the Silva Cell also help reduce root heave under sidewalks?
It does, because once those roots get down into the Silva Cells, into the good soil and air and moisture and things that are there, they aren't as apt to want to rise, because that's why they come to the surface, is when they don't have those
things. Should Silva Cells be used to interconnect several trees in a row? In other words, just to spread the whole system in between 2 tree openings down, let's say, the length of the street?
Yes. I mean, anytime that you give trees an opportunity to share soil volume, you can do with a little bit less soil volume per tree, because those trees are able to share. Also, it works great to use Silva Cells just as a breakout device. So say you have a tree in a green area, isolated by hard surface, but not too far away. Maybe you have a green area, like a lawn area or something like that. So if you can just put a couple rows of Silva Cells out, bridging that underneath that hard surface from where the tree is located to where that available green space is, that gives the roots an avenue to travel underneath the pavement where they aren't fighting compacted subbase and compacted soil. It gives them an avenue to work out and then spread out in the adjacent green area. And we have a number of details. We call those breakout zones.
Great. That is, I think that's what the person wanted to know. And we do really recommend, linking it up so that it's just, if it's not a breakout zone situation, that you do get the benefits of soil sharing for those trees, which is kind of the best bang for your buck in terms of money and also in terms of space, your excavation area. We have a couple questions. Oh, sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, we do a fair number of streetscape projects where when there's new sidewalk and new boulevard trees being planted, where at each tree they might put 6-8 Silva Cells underneath the sidewalk, underneath a panel of sidewalk over to the green area on the other side, especially when there's available front yards and other things on the other side of the sidewalk, just to help those tree roots get better access over into the adjacent green area.
Yeah, exactly. So we do have a couple of questions about how Silva Cells are used to manage and treat stormwater runoff, which is not exactly the topic of the webinar, but it is another really important topic, so I do want to touch on it. Pat, can you talk briefly about how efficient this system is for managing stormwater runoff and sort of the basics of using this system for that purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly on this question. May I just talk a little bit about, so more and more the Silva cells are being used to treat stormwater as well as to grow trees. I mean, there's other ways to treat stormwater, but they aren't necessarily going to help you grow your trees. So as long as, and you can combine those two efforts, it's a great opportunity. Again, remember the Silva cell frames are very open and they're not interconnected. They're only stacked vertically, not horizontally. So, you know, because of their openness, you're able to put pipe through very easily and connect up storm structures from one to another, or to put drainage in there if you're going to have something from the surface, like a pervious pavement. You know, it's easy to put your drainage through. When we do a stormwater system, typically we'll use a different soil mix. We'll use 80% sand, 20% compost mix, and a Western Washington rain garden mix or bioretention mix. We have some different numbers on what, using that mix, what a Silva cell, each Silva cell can store as far as water volume. I can't think of the number off the top of my head. Maybe Lita, you can help me out with that.
Yeah, it's we tell people as a rule of thumb that each Silva cell, which is 10 cubic feet of soil, can hold about 2 cubic feet of water. So approximately 20% of the system can be used for storage in a stormwater application. And that's a pretty conservative number because it's going to depend on the mix you choose, and it also doesn't take into account interception by the tree or evapotranspiration. And those are two ways that the tree contributes quite heavily to stormwater management that currently aren't really taken into account when stormwater calculations are done. And those are both really interesting because they improve as the tree grows. So as you get a bigger tree, you get greater and greater interception and evapotranspiration. So keep in mind that when you do hear us talking about stormwater numbers, we're basing that on the assumption of about 20% holding capacity, and we are not including those two other factors, interception and evapotranspiration. So they're pretty conservative numbers that we're talking about. And again, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I'm sorry. Are you finished?
I was just going to say that again, if people are interested in specific examples of stormwater projects, to check out the case studies section of our website, where you can filter by projects that are both trees and stormwater, and you can read a little bit more about how other people are using the system.
You know, one thing I wanted to touch on that the question reminded me of, or when I was thinking about answering it, is that I forgot to mention, you know, one thing about the Silva cells, and when it comes to doing utility repairs, it's really important to remember the part about that the Silva cells don't interconnect with each other, that each stack is its own individual stack, so that you can go in and you can remove one Silva cell, you can remove 2, you can remove 3, but you're not disturbing the integrity of the Silva cells around you. I mean, if you think of it as a modular block retaining wall, you know, if you have to go and make a repair underneath that, or you know, you have to start at a big V at the top, and you have to work your way down more narrow till you get to how wide you want to be, so that, you know, you have to unstack those blocks. That's not the case with the Silva cells. You know, you're able to go in there and remove individual stacks of cells without disturbing the integrity of the surrounding one. So I just want to make sure I got that out there.
Yeah, that's a great note to add. You mentioned that
as far as,
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, as far as stormwater, you know, like Lita pointed out, we have a lot of great different case studies, and there's just been all kinds of different creative uses of the Silva cells when it comes to stormwater. I mean, some people have experimented with the different types of medium that the Silva cells are filled with. You know, like I talked about, some are layered systems, some are rock, some are sand. We've had some people who have experimented with the void space. You know, we fill the Silva cells all the way to the top typically, but in some cases people are leaving a gap at the top for a ponding area to increase the volume and to hold hold the water for more volume for a longer period of time. So in other words, so that they can take bigger volumes or bigger storm events. So there's a lot of exciting things that are going on there, and people come up with a lot of creative things. So if you're interested in that type of a project, I really suggest you look at some of those case studies.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we've said it before and we'll say it again, but you can always write into us directly to answer any project-specific questions or point you in the right direction. We do have just a handful of questions left. I know people are dropping off, so we're going to try to get to them really fast. Pat, you said that the system meets AASHTO H20 loading standards. Does that mean it can be used under driveways?
In certain instances, for the most part, we've stayed out of heavy traffic areas, and the reason why is that, you have one product, and so you have to kind of pick your battles where you're going to be. I mean, we could beef it up to make it to be under traffic lanes of a roadway, but then, you don't grow a lot of trees out there. You do add soil volume, but we think we're better served where we can be underneath lighter traffic areas and like plazas and things like that. What it comes down to in the engineering side of things is it's not so much what your compressive strengths or your loading is, as when you get into traffic, it gets into occurrences and that constant loading and vibration from vehicles going over it. So,
but would a driveway count as a heavy traffic area?
It depends what kind of a driveway. If it's for a bus turnaround where buses are constantly pulling in and dropping people off and picking them up, then I would say,
then you would say yes.
Probably stay away from that, or we would look at doing some type of a heavy pavement section over the top.
But if it were like a home or something?
A home, absolutely, that would not be a problem. Same with not only just a home, but driveway. So to give you an idea, we have done Silva Cells on many major roads if they have a dedicated parking lane. In other words, a lane that's separated from traffic where a car pulls in and parks at the curb, so you're not getting the main line through traffic, high-speed traffic over the Silva Cells. We've also done Silva Cells in parking lots. We do Silva Cells in drive lanes of parking lots, as long as they're typically passenger car or light vehicle. In a commercial parking lot where you don't know what's pulling in, you don't know how many times the garbage trucks are coming, if bus traffic, things like that, then we have done those, but those are on selected cases. Where in those cases, we really want to understand the traffic counts and the axle loads that are going to be going over those and the frequency.
Okay. Now we have, just to go back to an earlier topic, a question about differential settlement. This person wants to know whether the compacted rock will push into the loose planting soil. I'm not sure whether they're envisioning a scenario between rock that's outside of the excavation area versus what's inside. So Pat, could you sort of speak to that as best you can?
Yeah.
That limited information?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that they're talking when they use the aggregate gap detail, or when you're filling an area with inside where you're leaving out cells, and that rock, that's why we always line the inside of the opening with geogrid, so that geogrid restrains the rock and keeps it from pushing into the soil. Because yes, the person who sent the question is absolutely right. Over time, there would be a tendency for that rock to migrate into the softer soils around it. But by putting geogrid at that interface between, the rock and the planting soil, that geogrid separates out, keeps the rock separate from the planting soil. I mean, you get some planting soil that will migrate towards the rock, but you will not get the rock migrating towards the planting soil.
Okay.
Just because of the aperture size.
In a similar line of questioning with the aggregate gap detail, we have someone who wants to know if the stone column is designed to allow roots to grow through. As this occurs, is there a risk of the roots eventually heaving the pavement in that, gap area?
There's always a risk of that. So I would say yes, there is. But you have to remember that there's a fair amount of resistance there at the surface, and you have a fair amount of void space. So it depends. I would say it depends on proximity to the tree. It just depends on how big the soil volume is that's been provided for the tree, and what adjacent soil volumes there are, and what the tree ability the tree has to tap into those. But I would say that there's always that chance.
Okay. Okay. Well, that is going to conclude today's webinar. Pat, do you have anything you want to say before I kind of get into the conclusion?
No. Again, I just want to thank everyone who's still left and for participating and having an interest in the product and how it can be used. And great questions. I've really been impressed by the type of questions that people have come up with, and I'm thankful for everyone who waited to get theirs answered. And I just want to make sure, I probably have one more slide that has my contact. I probably would have been nice if I would have had that up earlier. Sorry about that. But anyhow, that's me, Pat Greeley, pat@deeproot.com, or you can call the main office, and they can hook you up with me. Again, I have a lot of pictures from the different installations I've been to. A lot of times it's easier if you have a question, we talk, and I just send you a picture of something similar, and we can talk about it. If I can help in any way, talk through things with you, even sit down and visit, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Great. Thank you. And I just want to add to that we do have a review process that we go through with all of our projects before we begin the construction the construction stage. So everybody should be aware of that, and we encourage you to get in touch with us at any stage. We like to be involved as much as possible, and it kind of varies, sometimes more and sometimes less, but please feel free to reach out to Pat or to me, Lita@deeproot.com, at any point, and we will do our best to help you. So in addition to that, I just want to remind everyone that you're going to get the follow-up email with both Pat's slides and that short 5-question survey. We'd love to hear from you. And that all of this and more is also available on the DeepRoot website and on our blog, which is updated 3 times a week, and on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So you can find us a whole bunch of different places, and we are looking forward to working with you. Thanks, everyone, so much. Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Lita.